There's a whole world of cinema to be discovered. You just have to overcome that 1-inch barrier known as subtitles. Here we are.
Here we are.
Josh Barry.
That's you.
Nick Barrow.
That's me.
Kieran Griffiths.
Who's that guy?
That's you.
Hey!
Also, boo.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. The spooky season is upon us.
Halloween.
I
Yes.
would say a favourite time of the year for us movie-wise. I know you like horror films. I don't think we've spoken too much about horror films.
I always say that I don't like horror films, and
Sure.
yet every time I watch a horror film, which is admittedly quite rare, I end up going, "Oh, that was really good."
Yes.
But I think that's because I'm pretty choosy with it as
Yeah,
a genre.
yeah.
That's
right.
fair.
I think horror more so than probably any other genre has a lot of shit.
Yes.
Yeah, oh god, yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
yeah.
But there's a lot of good ones out there as well. So I think I just pick a lot of the good ones, and
Yeah.
that's why I'm like, oh, I actually like horror. But if I was
Horror's a good
watching, some of the really shitty horrors
Yeah.
that come out,
Were you about to say Saw? Were you about to say Saw 6 by chance?
it's funny you say that.
Yeah, no, but I think I would say I watch more than you off what we're going by, but I don't go into those ones. Like I don't.
No,
I haven't
sure,
seen
yeah.
Saw 7 or
No, the
whatever.
franchise is
Yeah.
where there's a new one every year.
Yeah,
and it's just jump scare after jump scare.
Yeah.
Like that's not.
No,
You know,
and I'm also a
that's
bit
me,
of a like for the original of those films, like Saw. I then feel like I don't want to like ruin it by
Sure.
it
'Cause that's actually a
gradually
really
getting
great
worse.
movie. Yeah, yeah,
amazing
yeah.
movie.
Really
yeah,
great
yeah,
movie.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
it's
be
really
interested to see what you
interesting.
think of Saw X, actually, because that's more in the vein
Okay.
of the original Saw.
Yeah, okay.
It's really interesting with horrors though, because I think again more so than any other genre, they do pump out a ridiculous number of sequels
Yeah.
because they know people will go and see them.
go-
Because
yeah.
people who love horror really love horror.
yes.
And
Yes, yeah.
there's been this whole thing in the last probably 10, 15 years with the introduction of people like Blumhouse, where you make them super cheap
They
and they're
make so
guaranteed
much
to
money.
make money.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it
yeah.
was very rare back in the early Blumhouse days, they'd make a movie for more than 10 million. And it's making, even if it makes 50, 60, 70 million, it's made 5,
Yes.
6 times its budget.
And that's not a new thing either. I mean, you look
No.
at like Blair Witch Project.
Oh man.
Yes.
Was made
Oh,
for
yeah.
about $12.
Yeah.
And it made tens, if not 100 million.
Arguably
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah,
original viral marketing campaign,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
incredible,
So
right?
good.
So,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the original Halloween,
Yeah.
Evil Dead, those were made on
and
very
horror's definitely
limited budgets.
it's definitely evolved a lot in the last few years, because we look at something like Longlegs this year has made $100 million worldwide,
Which is insane.
which is ridiculous. It's a slow burn crime thriller with like some creepy elements, and then
Yeah.
but you get like A24 are making lots of like
Yeah.
what people call heightened horror. I don't think that, or elevated horror.
Yeah,
I don't think,
right,
I
yeah,
think it's
yeah.
a cop out term, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
as a fan of the genre. But yeah,
But-
they make horror films outside of America.
They do.
And that's why we're here.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about 3 of
we've got
those
3,
for this
yeah.
Halloween. And we're
Yes.
kicking it off with a film that Josh picked.
I picked a French film, High Tension,
Yes.
or Switchblade Romance, or Haute Tension.
Attention.
But the director has said that he calls it High Tension.
I think that's good for reasons we'll get into later.
Yeah, yeah. 2003 horror film, directed by Alexandra Aja, who has done some probably pretty well-known stuff
Yeah.
now. He obviously did the Hills Have Eyes remake,
Yeah.
which I just saw that the reason he got that gig was Wes Craven saw High Tension.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And you can definitely see, seen both, you can see
Yeah.
those similarities
Yeah.
between the two films. Yeah.
And then what else has he done?
He did Crawl, which I think is
Yeah.
actually a really
Yeah.
effective, like,
Yeah.
monster crocodile thriller.
Yeah.
Like, that's really good.
Yeah.
And then he did something, he actually has a movie coming out in September
I
called
saw-
Never Let
with
Go,
Halle-
I believe, with Halle Berry.
Berry, yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is about evil spirits, like children connecting with evil
Yeah.
spirits. So he's definitely cemented himself in
Yeah.
as a horror director, and
Yeah.
very much based on,
Yes.
if you've seen at least The Hills Have Eyes, a
Yes,
very
yes.
grotesque horror
Grotesque, yeah.
director. Yeah.
So High Tension is it's a slasher film through and through. And actually, I mean, we've obviously all watched all 3 films. It was quite good to see that one's a slasher, one's a haunted house,
And one's a
vampire.
movie,
Like
yeah.
I quite
Yeah,
liked
unintentionally, because we didn't
Unintentionally,
talk
yeah.
about what
What we were
films we were
gonna-
picking.
No, we just threw
and
it
we
out
picked
there.
3 so different horror films.
real,
And from
like-
different countries, we managed
Yeah,
to
yeah,
Yeah, so
which
that's-
I thought was really cool. Like,
Good work, us.
We're just that good.
Yeah,
cool.
fuck yeah, we're great.
But yeah, so High Tension, basically a slasher, like home invasion film. Follows best friends Marie and Alexia as they decide to spend a quiet weekend at Alexia's family's secluded farmhouse. But on the night of their arrival, the girls' idyllic getaway turns into an endless night of horror.
That it does.
Or shit turns real.
And
It gets
quickly.
yeah.
Alexander Archer does not mind
No.
throwing you into some crazy
But I
shit.
thought it would be an interesting one because it's 41% on Rotten Tomatoes,
Interesting.
6.7 IMDb. I think it's got about a 30-something Metacritic. Wow. Like it's very...
So it's probably one of the lowest rated films that we've done on the show.
Very divisive.
Yeah. So, I think quite divisive because also people love it.
Yes.
And
Which is pretty normal for horror, I think.
True,
Like, even
for
the
sure.
really bad horror films have like their cult followings, right?
Sure.
True.
Yeah.
And I think
This-
horror fans are probably a bit more forgiving than general moviegoers.
There is
Yeah,
a vibe I got from this film, and working on vibes, that this has like cult film things to it. You know what I mean? Like I think there was. It doesn't shock me if there was a genuinely big audience who really enjoyed this film. This is wild.
I mean, it's got a 4K transfer on Second Sight Films, which is like
It would be very cool to see this movie in
substantial.
4K. Actually,
Yeah, especially
Yeah.
because I had to rent it off of YouTube in
Yeah, I
standard definition.
It was really hard to find, actually.
Which does add to the kind of grittiness of it, because it is a gross, dirty film.
It was filmed on 35mm.
That's even more excuse to see how that 4K
That's right.
restoration.
The restoration's meant to be really,
That's
really
cool.
good.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
But it premiered at Toronto International Film Festival in 2003 as part of the Midnight Madness section, where they do get a lot of those,
Makes sense.
controversial horror, a bit more out there films.
Yeah.
And then was acquired by Lionsgate, redubbed in English, re-edited to secure an R rating because it's pretty graphic. You wouldn't get this released uncut in the US as an R.
Did we see the uncut version? But I saw the
I saw the
uncut version.
uncut.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Lionsgate spent $14 million for a wide release in the US, where it ultimately grossed $3.6 million.
Gosh.
Wow. Well, I guess bad reviews initially don't help with that sort
And
of
being
thing.
redubbed in English.
And
Yeah,
that's
that
true,
would
yeah.
be,
And I think, I don't know how common this is, but whenever I hear that a movie, because it actually recently happened here in Australia with Killers of the Flower Moon, it was re-edited to secure a more, it was an MA and was re-edited to secure an M. And I think people sometimes hear that. Obviously, it didn't matter in the case of Killers of the Flower Moon, but something like this, if I hear that, I'm kind of going, I'm getting fucking jibs. Like,
Yeah.
I want to see.
Yeah, I wanna see the-
Also, why is it up to a classification board to determine what I can see? That's a whole other argument, by the way.
If I want to watch a Serbian film, I'll watch a Serbian film.
in
God
all
damn
its
it.
fucking glory. But yeah,
And speaking of a Serbian film,
I was just about to say that.
so this film
surprise. That's what we watched.
so this film is sort of associated with being part of the French New Extremity movement.
Yeah, I've got...
Yeah,
Interesting.
which isn't sort of a clearly defined movement in the same way as like French New Wave.
Sure.
But it was sort of this movement of films in probably from the late 90s onwards, often coming out of France, but Europe as well, that were, really pushing the boundaries, quite controversial, dealing with subject matters like, horror and violence and sexual violence and things like that. So you look at the films of like Gaspar Noé, who we covered with Climax, and he's got some films like that as well. You've got Inside, which is another French horror, Irreversible, Gaspar Noé, a Serbian film. So those kind of films that are really pushing the boundaries
Of what we
what's-
can see.
Yeah, and this
one
and
sits in at 2003. Yeah, I had this exact thing. Like Irreversible was a year before.
Yeah.
Martyrs, which is a is a well-known one, 2008, and it's kind of Serbian film 2010.
Yeah.
But it's still like if you look at it, it's still going. Like Revenge.
Yeah.
2017
Carly
was
Budget,
actually kind of reminded me a bit of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can talk about
and
even
then
things like
Titane and-
Julia DeCorno with Raw and Titane. Like that's that body horror as well.
Yes.
But
I'm
with
so
that
excited.
European
But this was
twist.
this is early on and in that, and I remember watching it just as it came out.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was really new to me. Like this was like I hadn't seen this
Anything like
full
yeah,
before.
yeah.
Like I think I'd seen Irreversible.
Sure.
But
Which again
they're
has
different.
violent moments,
It
but
has
it's not a
violent
slasher
moments,
film,
but they're
right?
so
Yeah.
different. Yeah,
It's extreme.
And
but
this
it's
one,
not,
I just remember by the end of it, just going, "Whoa!"
Yeah.
But now watching it
Again.
again, like 15 No,
It was 21 years later,
20
yeah.
years later. Oh my god. I was
I'm not
like,
going to tell you how old I was when this came out. No, yeah.
let's not go.
I
into
wasn't
that.
legally allowed to watch it.
It's just interesting to look now and just as a newcomer to this film, I'm really interested to see what you guys think.
Yes.
Because since then, so much has come. Like, I was like, oh yeah, this has been done so many times now.
This is the sort of violence, like, not in a way that I want to make it detrimental to my parents' parenting, but these are the movies that, like, I grew up watching, these extremely violent sort of horror films that I loved watching growing up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was very interesting, not to take away from the fact that High Tension is very graphic and very violent.
Yeah.
I had some scenes where even I was like, ooh.
Yeah, me too.
There's a great circular saw scene.
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very interesting. I'm not going to argue against the fact that there's like a desensitization to a lot of that violence.
As you get older, and I think as we've kind of gone on, like I think the violence, you look at something like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween,
Yes.
right? And you compare that to High Tension, then you compare it to films that are coming out now. And I think you see so much
even in
violence.
Action films now, like the John Wick films are brutal.
You just, as you said, you become so desensitized to it. You go, oh, look, someone getting their head blown off again. You know, so you do get really numb to it. Whereas I think in 2003, it would have been, as you would
quite
experience,
shocking.
quite
It
shocking.
definitely was, yeah.
Well, it is gritty.
Yeah.
It is violent.
It
is
is.
full of blood.
Yeah.
Right from the first bookcase decapitation.
brutal.
I
which
mean, even
love.
before that, I think in the first 5 minutes, you've got a guy
that is
filleting a severed head.
Yes.
Which is...
Which that slow, like, camera pan in
Yeah.
is just like,
so
I know what
and
he's
then
doing.
just the discarding of it out of the
Yeah,
car.
after he's finished in more ways than one, he throws it out of the window of his
And
truck.
you've got to think about things like that in that, especially in a film like this, where the story is very much second to the tension and the violence that's happening.
Yeah.
What is a better way to shock your audience early on? You know what I mean?
No,
Like, I think that's
it's
the
a really-
whole point of
yes.
this film, right? And especially if we're talking about this French extremist filmmaking style. A dude face fucking his severed head and then throwing it out the window is like...
In the first 5 minutes.
What do you... Where do you go from there? And then Alexandre Aja finds a way to just continue that. Like I said, it just gets crazier and crazier.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it really does start at 11 and just stays there.
maintains it. Yeah.
It doesn't ramp up the tension. It just flicks the switch on and leaves it on for 90 minutes.
Yep.
Which I think this was the shortest of the 3 films. we
I
watched.
believe so, yes.
None of them were over 2 hours, but this one clocks in at just over
It's
90
rare for
minutes.
us. Yeah. So, and I think it didn't need to be longer. If anything, there was probably elements where I think could have been shorter.
Yeah.
I do think it's funny we talk about how it starts at 11 and stays there. I do think it dips down. I think it takes a little bit too long. We're with Marie and Alexia a little too long.
Yeah.
Like at the beginning part. I know that probably sets up for what then happens, the twist at the end, I guess.
Yeah.
But there was moments where I'm like, I think, and it's tough. I had to try and watch this from the point of view of seeing it in 2003 because, like, I've seen this story many times before.
Yes.
The two friends who are really close to each other, and they're like, "We're just carefree students."
Yeah.
And like, well,
As
you know,
I
what
was
happens to
watching
those
it,
guys?
I was watching it, I was remembering watching it the first time.
Yeah.
And then kind of thinking of you guys 20 years on going, you're going to have seen this, like, what it,
So it's so interesting that, right, having to watch films through sort of this objective lens.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
you watch films from like the 70s and the 80s. I mean, would have been last Halloween, I think. The cinema near me played Rosemary's Baby, which I've never seen.
Oh, yeah.
And people talk about that as being one of the best and scariest horror films ever made. And I'm sure it was in 1970, whatever it came out, even late 60s maybe?
Might have been
Rosemary's
late
Baby?
60s, yeah.
Yeah. But I was like, oh, this is a horror? Like,
Well,
it's got, thrillery elements, but it's like, I'm not scared by this, but I imagine watching it in the 60s
time would
and
have
like all this
been-
demonic possession and
Yes.
satanic stuff, like that's fucking terrifying.
Controversial. I'm the same with the original The Exorcist. I think it's a fantastic film, but it doesn't scare me. But at the same time, like, I don't believe in demons, right? But you can imagine in the 70s where people were like so into the church and so into, and they're going like, holy shit, like Satan's on our screen. Like, I think that's...
My mum and dad told me they went and saw that at the cinema.
And it just changed. Yeah, it would have
like
chills, right?
Yeah.
Same way that Hereditary did for me.
Yeah,
but then
yeah.
10, 15 years from now, kids coming up now be like, "What are you scared of that, you little pussy?" I'm like, okay, whatever.
Like mum and dad, I think mum said she had a Ouija board at home, and they went home and like just threw it in the bin.
Oh, that's
was like,
great.
we're not
I love
going
that.
near that ever again.
So then you flip that, right? The
Yeah.
demonic possession of the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and do that with extreme violence now.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
can imagine, like, even Texas Chainsaw Massacre was considered unruly violent, like unreleasably
One thing
violent.
that was banned in the UK.
Yes,
My mum
you're right.
in the video nasties era, right?
Yeah,
Like,
her like childhood, teenage years when Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out in the UK.
Yeah.
And I remember her telling me like it was banned and she really wanted to watch it.
And you kind of go like, well, then it creates that sort of, and I'm assuming it would have been the same here. It's R-rated in Australia, and you go, oh, gee, and it creates that intrigue and
Well, I
stuff.
remember going to the video shop with my parents when I was a kid, and you'd always look at the stuff that was in like the horror section and the
100%.
R-rated section. You're
just
like,
look
oh,
at the
I want
covers.
that. You're like, no, you can't watch that. You can MA only. But Mum, I'm 12 now.
Your parents had good morals, and they'll like will only show you the 15 plus when you're 12. But then you look at the violence in this, and then it's a very tense movie because it's an a home invasion film, and I think Alexandre Aja does that incredibly well. It's very claustrophobic.
Yeah.
He puts you in the closets when they're hiding, and I love the way he frames the killer. You don't ever see his full face. It's these really, and he's a
it's like just
grotesque
under the
looking man.
hat.
Yeah.
He's like fat and sweaty.
Longlegs
and...
did that recently. They didn't show Nicolas Cage's face throughout the film,
No,
like the first
true.
hour.
That's so true,
Because
yeah.
what I find you do anyway is you create worse images
Yes.
in your head.
Yes.
When you are hearing something or get a slight picture of something, you create the worst version of it in your head. I think this movie does that
Yes.
really, really well.
Yeah, I agree.
Then you add this hectic violence on top. There's the bookcase decapitation and the amount of blood that comes out of the dad's. Do you know what was the most fucked up part of that scene for me though? Is when he pushes his head through the staircase
Through the
first.
banister, yeah.
That to me was more fucked up than him getting decapitated. I was like, well, that's sadistic.
Yes.
It's awful.
Yeah.
And he does all this, the killer, we don't know anything about him.
No.
He doesn't say anything.
No.
He does it, so he's basically just this like gross old trucker looking guy
Yeah.
that rocks up at the house and decides to kill everyone in the house
Yeah.
without saying a word.
Which is scarier. When you don't have a full motive, it's kind of scary too, yeah.
I think that opening scene that we were talking about before, where
Yes.
it pans in and he's enjoying.
I believe I said face fucking ahead. Yeah.
Right. I like that setup because it's not telling you too much, but it's basically telling you he's a lunatic serial
disgusting,
killer.
yeah.
Like he's just going around killing, and that's all the kind of backstory you need.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And then it's just in.
It's interesting as well because I think like sex and horror are so intertwined so
Sure.
often.
Yes.
I mean, how many horror films have we seen where there's, like a group of female characters and there's usually like one overly promiscuous one and then one quite sheltered one.
Yes, yeah.
And
The
that's
final
what
girl,
happens here. Like
Yeah.
Marie, they sort of joke about her being a virgin. And they talk about how Alex, just sleeps with every guy that she sees.
Yeah.
Well, Alex is masturbating within the first 15 minutes
Yeah.
of this film. So you just sit there and listen to music before the house invasion starts,
Yeah.
and you just get this idea that she's far more sexually
Promiscuous.
liberal, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So she's played by Cecile de France.
Yes. Who the whole movie was trying to where do I know her from? I watched Around the World in 80 Days so much as a kid. Not the original. The one with Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Steve Coogan. So I remembered her from that. She was a very familiar face. Yeah.
I mean, I think she's so good in this. I think she's really good. And then, sorry, what's the other girl's name?
Marie.
Marie is played by Ma Wen.
No, other way around. Cecile de France is Marie.
Oh, sorry.
And Ma Wen is
we've got
Alex.
totally
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. Ma Wen, who recently popped up on my radar when we were talking about Melina for some reason, because I was looking just around movies around it, and that new Johnny Depp film.
Yeah, I
Jean
saw.
de Barry.
She's directed it.
She directed Johnny Depp's comeback to cinema.
Yeah.
So.
And she directed a
Scary
2011 film, Police.
Oh.
Which is definitely a French film that I see pop up.
Yeah,
around.
right. Okay.
And she was in Leon, the professional. I know.
Yeah.
She's been,
really?
She's had a career, eh? Yeah.
And then the killers played by Philip Nahon, who looks like he's got 229 credits to his name.
Holy shit. Well done, Philip.
And,
Philippe.
and it looks like fairly
what?
prolific in horror. He was in Irreversible.
And do you know what? I feel sorry for the guy, but you have the look for
He
this
does-
sort
he
of
does
movie, mate.
have the
Like
look.
this,
They-
like
He's found his niche,
Yeah.
and he's
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 gone
done it.
for
He's
it.
done it 229
Gone
times.
for it.
But he's effective. I think
He
there's
is,
something about his size and the way he moves around that is also
Yes.
because like I think there's so many. You see things like we see slasher films, I guess, where there's almost supernatural elements to the way killers can get away with it, or something like
Yeah.
Scream, right?
Yeah.
Where
Yes.
where Ghostface, no matter who it is like always fast moving and is
Yeah.
running around. You see, there's something about the way he just plods around slowly and
Yeah.
grotesquely and just pudgy.
Yes.
It just, there's something gross where like if he gets you, you don't know what's going to happen next. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
like laying over the whole film. Like
Yeah.
it's just, this is a gross movie, and don't let
Yeah,
that be
it
a
is, it
deterrent
is.
if you're into that,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
like it works.
Yeah.
The tension is high, so to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like with what you're talking about with like the supernatural thing, it is like Halloween.
Sure.
Right,
Yeah,
where,
yeah,
where
yeah.
Michael Myers...
The shape is,
He can just...
Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
is
he
like,
can appear out of anywhere and
Yeah.
just do anything, and he's got
And
this
you
like
were-
superhuman strength.
You're
and-
okay with it as an audience. You kind of like, all right, well, this guy's obviously not real. So whereas there is a gritty realism.
Yeah,
realism to
you think
this?
about
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Wolf Creek.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes,
that,
yeah.
that's a great
Halo.
example, I think,
It
of
is.
like
Oh.
you know, the killer being a real person and being
Yeah.
limited by real world
Quite
possibilities.
scarier, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I definitely think so, and I think home invasion films are always really terrifying because that's such a real fear I think everyone has.
Sure.
Like, there's nothing scarier than someone who wants to hurt you being in your private space.
Your safe
Yeah,
space,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
the same way that like getting burgled is like one of the scariest things that can happen to a person, like because someone's been in
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
your
Into your
home, in your
space.
safe space.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's why home invasion films are always
Yeah.
really effective. You look at Funny Games.
I've never seen
No,
it.
no,
I
no.
really want to.
Yeah, I
I
wanna
do
see
want
it.
to
Like
see it.
obviously Michael Haneke did the original and the English language remake, but that's sort of a
That's a home invasion film.
and sort of a just because we can.
Yes.
There's no
Yeah.
there's no logical reason.
Oh,
it's
one
not
of my
happening to you
favourite-
for any specific reason. It's just because we could.
One of my favorite horror movie lines ever is The Strangers, like
Yeah.
the Liv Tyler one, and they
Oh,
go,
yeah.
"Why are you doing this to us?" And like, "Because you were
it-
home." Like that's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
fucked up. It's fantastic.
And that's scarier.
It's way
Yeah.
It's not
scarier.
because you've done anything wrong. It's
No.
not because you deserve it. It's just you were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You opened the door.
Um,
It does move away from the house though, as well. We'll
It
say.
does,
Like there's a
yeah.
chase element in a
Yeah.
car as well.
So the
Like
parents
a
are
gas
killed
station.
off by
Yeah, quite
by
early.
the murderer pretty
Yeah.
early on.
Yeah.
Marie sort of hides away from the killer.
Yes.
Doesn't want him to know that she's home because she's obviously only visiting the family
Yes.
at their home.
Yeah.
So
So yeah,
the
quickly
younger brother
makes
gets
like
killed.
the bedroom look like it hasn't been stayed in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty quick
like,
thinking.
it's nice little
Like
touch,
a
isn't
spare.
it?
Yeah, it makes the guest room look like there's no one staying in
Yes,
there. So the
yeah.
killer comes in, and we get this very tense moment where
Yeah.
he's looking around the room for evidence that there's someone there.
Checking the heat of the radiator.
Yeah, that was a nice
that was a
touch.
good touch. Yeah.
And checking the tap to see
Yes.
if it's been, there's been any
And there's
water
like-
in the
yeah,
sink.
yeah.
So
way he
the
just-
parents get killed, the brother gets killed, Alex,
dog
who's
gets
the
killed.
daughter, the dog gets killed.
The dog does get
which
killed.
I'm really not okay with.
Yeah. That's pushing it too far.
And then Alex gets kidnapped by the killer,
Yeah.
and Marie sort of spends the rest of the movie kind of battling with him and trying to chase him down and rescue Alex.
Yes.
And then we sort of go from there. And then
Let's.
we've got to get into the twist.
We've got to
right?
talk about
We
the
do.
twist.
I mean, there is a twist.
Yeah. So
Um,
there is an alternative title for this film, which is Switchblade Romance.
Yes.
And I'm really glad it wasn't called that because not only does it give you the idea that that's what the twist ultimately is,
True.
there is an element of that I don't like.
Yeah.
The twist almost derailed the whole film.
Totally. And as a I picked this film.
Yes,
It,
of course.
It's stayed with me since I first
Yeah,
saw
yeah.
it. I can't quite. I had forgotten. Interestingly, I'd forgotten.
I
the
don't
twist.
know how you could forget that twist.
It was 20 years ago. I just forgot.
Fair enough, yeah. Watched a lot of movies in that last 20 years.
And this time I was like, oh.
Yes.
I
So
was definitely like you're definitely, and I think this is where all those ratings come
I
from.
think so.
If you can't get past this twist, it could derail the whole film.
and it kind of almost did. So the twist is that Marie has been the killer the whole time.
Yeah.
And first thing it did for me, and I never want to be this person who's like, there's plot holes in your film. Because I'm like, Movies can have plot holes. They're trying to tell a story the best way they can, and if there's some little gaps in that, that's fine. This movie, the reveal of Marie being the killer opens up so many plot holes for the film about where she is at certain points as what we're seeing, as opposed to what the killer is doing at that time. I don't mind the idea that, she's so in love with Alex that she wanted to kill her whole family just to have her to herself. That's fine. It's like this obsessed lover thing. We've seen that before. That doesn't bother me. But I never got that earlier.
No.
I thought they were close friends. I thought they,
for sure.
I thought they really did like love each other in that sense, but I never got like Marie was
Any
obsessed with.
infatuation.
It doesn't set it up enough to warrant that payoff. And Roger Ebert, the great man, said there is a plot hole in this film large enough that you could drive a literal and metaphorical truck through it.
The movie does.
To
be honest.
I will happily go on record as saying this is the stupidest fucking twist I've ever seen in a film.
It's up there.
Yeah.
And we've done like this character was dead the whole time, or this character was imaginary the whole time. Like you look at The Sixth Sense or Fight Club, and sorry if you haven't seen those films, they're fucking 30 years old, get over it. But you can do it effectively. Like you look at Shutter Island. You know, that's 15 years old, shut up. But that's a great example, I think, of like, they imagined it the whole time. That is like you could see it coming, but it earns its payoff, and it's like, shit, that's insane.
When it validates your thoughts about it, where you're like, holy, like, is he actually real? And then you go, that's good, that's what you want as an audience.
But when the twist was revealed and they go, there was no killer, Marie killed the whole family, she kidnapped Alex. I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
I will say though, despite not liking the twist, I do love the shot of when it's still the male killer going down to Alex, and then the camera turns around and then it shows Marie's face. I was like, that's a great shot.
So I did watch a guy talk about this film, and he also came out, like big advocate for the film, but came out and said, the twist is it's not handled well.
No.
So he said, and I agree, all they needed to do was do a little setup. Like at the start, that they show her foot, so she's kind of in the is it police or hospital?
Psychiatric hospital.
Psychiatric hospital. All they needed to do was have her start an interview with like a policeman or a detective.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing could have been just like her recounting.
Yeah, so you get into that unreliable narrator territory.
Yeah.
I still think there's a lot of holes even with that, because I have seen some reviews that are like, people say the twist is dumb, but you're hearing the story from her perspective. It's like, but that doesn't explain why the killer rocked up in a truck outside the house when Marie was upstairs in the bedroom. So either we have to assume that Marie went out of the bedroom, went outside, got into a truck, and then went and knocked on the front door.
For sure.
Or she's making that bit up, which just undermines
there's parts of the story where she's nowhere near someone else getting killed as well. But there's things that she is doing that are imperative to the narrative too. So it's just not handled well. No, it's just not a well-handled twist. It reeks of we don't know how to end the film.
And we want to subvert expectations. So what can we do? We can throw in a twist.
This is like what I would have done it, like 13 years old, short story in school, and it was all a dream. I'm like, I fucking love this. And you find the whole class.
But it's also funny as well, because I just don't think the film needs a twist.
It doesn't. No.
I think you
have a final girl standoff with the killer.
You have a pretty
circular saw,
effective,
please.
like you have a pretty effective, albeit kind of overdone and a bit cliched slasher film. That just goes a bit extreme in terms of its grittiness and its brutality and its grotesqueness. And that's fine. That's a solid 3.5 star if you're into slasher films, kind of slasher film. It's gross, it's dirty, and you get like as you said, like this final standoff between Marie and
Can we just talk about how fucking cool? Okay, this is coming from me as the horror guy. The circular saw going through the car window and just like inches, and then as it's so gross. I loved it. She never goes like into it. It's just always like, and it's just blood.
So the guy in the driver's seat,
so
she's gone through the windshield with a circular saw. He's in the driver's seat, trapped in there, and she's just like going straight into his stomach.
Nicking him with it initially, and it's just so.
And what's also cool about that scene is there's just lots of camera shots on Alexei just getting covered in blood. Insane amounts of blood.
Funny enough that I read on the IMDb trivia too, the lens they used in that scene, because there's a shot where the blood spurts onto the lens. the production that used those lenses next, when the camera, there was so much dried blood inside of it that it started leaking down onto the, which is like,
I mean, if they were making a horror film, that would have been
worked
great.
out well, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Don't tell Alfonso Cuarón, he'll try and can the whole shot, but like, Children of Men reference. But there, like, it is just an insane amount of blood in this film. Like, and it's cool. It's, like you said, it's just that gritty slasher sort of thing.
Gore-fest,
Would have just loved if it was the male killer just holding that at the end. Even if it's the guy picking them up in the car, that's fine, because you want as many expendable innocent bystanders as possible for these sorts of films. Not in real life, I'm not a psychopath. But there's so many elements of the ending that are great that are just tarnished by the fact that, like, it was Maria all along.
Yeah, and I think if you'd built up that obsessive relationship more,
Yes.
then it could have been like, you know, and then you've got this creepy killer who abducts young women. You've sort of got, you know, two awful people. You've got this serial killer who abducts young women, and then Marie, who is sort of obsessively in love to the point of being dangerous with her friend. Yeah. And either way, you know, Alex isn't safe. She's going to end up with someone who's going to do terrible things to her, whether it's this, you know, mysterious killer or her supposed best friend. That's a better film. Get rid of the twist, set up that relationship.
For sure.
You've got an effective slasher. But the twist just it pulls the rug out from under you and then just shits all over the rug.
Because it's revealed probably about 15 minutes from the end, and then in a 90-minute film, that's still a long time to sit with it. So
for me, and it's funny because I will normally just, it will kill it for me. Like I'll just think about that and that's it. But for this one, I don't know if it's because of how quickly it turns into the chase scene. I pretty much, I'm like, I'm checked out of the twist and I'm back in.
Interesting,
and that doesn't happen to me often with a film. So
interesting. Okay.
There's something about this that really
you like the style, and you like
I love
you're
the style.
Enough to forgive.
I do love the style of this film.
I love it
it's
too.
Beautifully shot.
I didn't know it was shot on film, which is I'm glad you said that, because that grittiness really works. For me, gives you that old Texas chainsaw Halloween feel.
So I for some reason am able to
a bit more forgiving.
And
that's totally fine. Like, I think, you know, we've talked about this before, where you're more willing to overlook flaws for films you enjoy, however obvious they are. Whereas if you're not enjoying a film, you will nitpick plot holes, and you'll go, "Oh, that shot's terrible," or "That performance isn't bad." Roger Ebert also had another great comment. We've got to quote Ebert because he is the film.
He's the guy,
you know, except for David Stratton.
Shout out
to my boy.
I'm a Margaret fan myself, but that's all right. Love them both together.
But Roger Ebert said, the philosopher Thomas Hobbes tells us life can be poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So is this movie.
Wow. You know what? Best way to sum it up.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Well, do you want to start with your star rating, Josh? Because I feel like it might be a little bit higher than Kieran's.
Yeah, I think so.
What was it in 2003?
I don't think I was actually star rating stuff back then.
If you
so
take
I
yourself
don't know.
I
don't know.
Was it more positive than negative, though?
Oh, yeah, like, this was, for me, I'm like, this film is amazing.
Yeah,
like, right. Shook my world, really, especially for, like, at that point, probably, I was like early 20s. So this really, like, pushed me into this sort of horror style of film.
French extremism.
It was early on when I was getting into foreign as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And this was like, whoa, this is what they do over in France.
That's
like,
cool.
Yeah. Look, if I had to guess back then, probably about a 4.5.
Wow. Yeah. And in 2024,
I think I'm still with a 4.
Okay.
I'm still a 4 on this. As I was watching it and that twist happened, I'm like, oh god, 3.5. But then very quickly got over it.
Yeah.
And this, it does stay with me for days after.
Yeah, wow.
I do think about it. Like, I think it is the stylistic, I'm not surprised he's gone on to be a fairly prolific director because you can see in this he's got great.
Because did you enjoy even like the Hills Have Eyes remake?
I love the Hills Have Eyes.
So do I. I think it's great. And
I really
Crawl,
like
if
that.
you haven't seen Crawl,
I liked Crawl. Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
So
I think he's made a few.
He's definitely made a couple in between there. I'm trying to remember
but I'm still gonna go a 4-star with this. Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Nick?
Ah, damn. That was a great
he
idea.
quickly
He got in quick, didn't he? Shit.
He did.
Too slow, old man.
I tell you what, I'm very similar to Josh in the sense I love the aesthetic of this film. I love the grittiness, and obviously I love the slasher violence as well. The twist just, it like Kieran said, pulled the rug from under me, and it really fucks me up. I'm really broken by it. No.
Yeah, this could have been great.
It could have been great. I'm going to go with 3.
Yeah.
It's still enough for me to be like, it was probably teetering on like a 3.5, probably for most of the film.
Yeah.
So yeah, 3 for me. As someone who does enjoy this, like, it's tough because I've seen so many movies like this before, but I love the grittiness of it as well.
Just like quickly speaking about films, In a Violent Nature, which came out this year.
Yes.
Which I did not like.
Yes. Very interesting, isn't it?
When I was watching this, I'm like, I found In a Violent Nature copies or would borrow a lot from this.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, doesn't get the villain right.
Right. Yeah.
Like you were saying before, this guy is very realistic and he's not super fast or anything.
No.
And In a Violent Nature, that guy is so slow.
So yeah.
Like
he's
he's
just walking around for the rest of the film.
So just those two films, I was like,
it's an interesting
they're
comparison.
kind of
actually,
similar films.
Yeah, I would agree.
Really gory.
Yep.
And just walking around like
You know,
for no reason.
You're always waiting what's going to happen next in both movies.
Really didn't like that new one, but yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There we go. Kieran, finish us off.
As we were talking about, like, it's so hard to watch these older films and not feel like you've seen it a million times.
I thought that
like, it's
as we were
so hard
watching
to get
it,
into that mindset of
yeah.
going, oh, but, and like, obviously it does borrow from things we've talked about, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like Friday the 13th, like Halloween, but it's still, you know, contemporary compared to some of the other things we've seen. So I was watching and going, oh, like it's an effective, really gritty and gross slasher. I'm not a big slasher fan. I find them a bit dull. So I'm like, oh, it's a 3-star film. Like it's doing what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
And then the twist happened. And honestly, I swear to God, I fucking hated it. It's a 2-star film, and that's generous.
Yeah.
Wow.
I really didn't like
So
it.
it did enough to, like, all that, like, 3-star lead up, it was enough to, wow.
It completely undermines it. It feels like such a slap in the face
I
to
don't.
the audience.
That doesn't surprise me.
No, it doesn't.
Especially
No, not at all.
looking at scores online.
Yes, sure.
That camp is there. Like, if that twist hits like that, you are not going to forgive the film.
No, I think it's downright offensive to the audience.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like, it just feels so unnecessary.
It does. It is.
And I think
and
there
it
is
is unnecessary.
Yeah, and I think there is a better film there, as we talked about. A couple of things I did want to touch on. This film is supposedly, allegedly, a complete rip-off, almost, of a Dean Koontz novel.
Oh, I did read that. Yeah.
So, Dean Koontz wrote the book Intensity, which was released in 1995. And there are a lot of similarities, especially the first half of the film is pretty much beat for beat from what I've read.
Okay. And in that book is the twist a thing?
I don't know. I know the first half is pretty much identical, but I'm not sure about sort of the ending. So the director was questioned at Sundance in 2004 and acknowledged that he had read the novel and that there were similarities. And on his website, Dean Koontz stated that he was aware of the comparison but would not sue, quote, because he found the film so puerile, so disgusting, and so intellectually bankrupt that he didn't want the association with it that would inevitably come if he pursued an action against the filmmaker.
Oh, wow.
So he basically went, that film is so fucking bad that I don't even want to acknowledge that I had anything to do with it.
Wow.
Which, I mean, that goes hard as an insult.
It does.
And the other thing I want to talk about is this film was made on a pretty low budget of about $2.5 million US dollars, I think, when converted.
Yeah.
How did they afford to get a Muse song on the soundtrack?
For the end credits.
Like Muse in 2003 as well.
Maybe they just loved the horror, but maybe it's like the movie.
Yeah.
There's
I
so
reckon
many
that's where
stories.
$2 million of the budget went. Because I can't imagine a Muse song is cheap to get in your soundtrack.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
Like, I think it looks great for that money.
Oh, yeah.
And the practical effects are
Really
good.
The
And
gore is great.
I like a lot of the shots. I think the score is really effective.
it is.
And it does build tension really well. The scene in the gas station
actually.
about halfway through the film.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic.
The tension there is awesome.
Yeah.
And that's why I was like, this is a 3-star film. Like, this is doing it for me.
Yeah.
But
and then that,
the twist ruins it. But
when I when I finished watching this, I was just thinking, I know what Kieran is. And when you messaged saying, I've watched 2, I can't wait to talk about these, I was like, I know what it's going to go down as.
Joke's on you, I'd watch the other 2.
Yeah, no, you hadn't. I looked on your letterbox.
Fucking letterbox.
Yeah, catches us all out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the biggest disparity we've had
Yeah.
on the show. 2 whole stars. Because what did you give Mandals?
Yeah, I gave that 2.5.
We all
That's
went
only
low.
a star.
But what was the last one we did? Didn't we
On
have
Body and Soul?
That was a
That was a
fairly
big one too.
I gave that 3.
Yeah,
we gave
we
a
were
4. I gave a 4. You gave a
strong
4.
4 to 4. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, 2
so
stars
the
is a
two,
big
yeah,
difference.
That probably is a big
Here I am in the
difference,
middle, the diplomat,
Yeah.
keeping the boys
So-
together, keeping the family together.
Nick is the glue that holds this podcast together. Josh and I bicker a lot off screen.
Well,
That
Okay.
was High Tension.
Halloween episode 1.
1 done and dusted.
Slasher done. Next is
My pick,
Yes.
which is Let the Right One In, which is a vampire movie from
Swedish
Sweden, 2008,
Yeah.
which I'd never seen before, but
atmospheric.
you two...
I hadn't
No,
seen Let Me
I
In.
can't believe.
I'd seen Let Me In.
I
that
just
which
could
is the
not
American
believe
English
remake.
language
So,
remake.
yeah, what's going to be interesting about that is you guys have both seen Let Me In.
No.
Oh, you haven't seen Let Me In.
No. So you've
Okay.
seen...
I've
you've
seen Let Me In, but not
In.
Let the
Okay,
Right One In.
we're
You've
all
seen
coming-
both? You've
I'd seen both, but I'd
and
seen
I
Let the
hadn't
Right
seen-
One In first.
Yeah, and I hadn't seen
Yeah.
either, and I still
There we
haven't
go.
seen Let Me
Okay,
In.
that'll
so
be interesting.
that'll
chat.
We're all
good
coming at it from a
conversation.
different angle.
Yeah.
So that'll be next week. You get treated to an episode every single week for October. Lucky you. So yeah, we'll be back in a week for Let the Right One In. We hope you've enjoyed listening to us talk about High Tension, and we'll see you all in a week's time.
Yeah.